All right, welcome everybody. It's Joe with Others Electric here, and today we're going to be going over our company training. We created a slideshow for the 2024 Florida Building Code changes, updates. This is the residential electrical edition, so we're only going to be talking about electrical code changes pertaining to the residential electrical side of things. So basically, the 2024 building code, Florida Building Code, adopted the 2020 NEC. So we went from 2017 to 2020, and we're going to go over that today. So this is only the things that pertain to residential electrical, and also I want to say that welcome everybody, first of all. Hope you're doing well. And if you have anything that you think that we missed or you want any more information on, don't be afraid to hit us up. You can email me, jmyers@otherselectric.com. Okay. All right, so let's just get started. So again, we'll just go right into it. 2024 building code changes, residential electrical edition. So let's go. All right. So why we use the 2020 NEC in Florida in 2024? So Florida Statute 55373 says to use the Florida Building Code 8th edition. Okay, and if you read that, it tells you to use the Florida Building Code 8th edition, which is effective date through December 31st, 2023. So basically January 1st, in Florida January 1st of 2024, in Florida, you are required to use the 8th edition of the Florida Building Code. And if you go to Chapter 7 in the Florida Building Code, it says, it's the electrical chapter, and it says to use NFPA 70, okay, but it doesn't. Chapter 27 doesn't tell you which version of the NEC to use. 2017, 2014, 2020, 2023. So you have to go to Chapter 35 of the Florida Building Code, and it says NFPA 70-20, which is that which is why we use the 2020 NEC. All right, so the first major change pertaining to the residential in the 2020 building code, 2020 NEC, is the means of identification, 200.9, means of identification of terminals. It says in the 2020 NEC, in devices or utilization equipment with polarized connections, the identification of terminals to which a grounded conductor is to be connected shall be substantially white or silver in color. The identification of other terminals shall be of a readily distinguishable different color. This is really no effect, right? So what they're talking about is a grounded conductor is your neutral. In equipment with polarized connections, it's just saying that it can be white or silver. They added the or silver. No major change, because most everything we get is already white or silver. So this really has no effect on what we do. We already do. It basically adds terminology, and most terminals are already silver. And here's a definition of polarized connection. Polarized connections, these are connections where the conductors must be connected in a specific way to function properly and safely. This polarity must be maintained to ensure the equipment operates correctly and to avoid safety hazards. So that's what they added with polarized connections. And basically, polarized connections, if it requires a hot and a neutral to run, right? If it doesn't require polarized connections, like A phase and B phase on a 120, 240 volt system, it's not polarized. All right, another change, 200.10, identification of terminals, 210B. This is receptacles, plugs, and connectors. basically they did the exact same thing, except this is specifically 210B is specific for receptacles, plugs and connectors. All right. They added the same terminology. They added the white or silver with the letter W now. So you can have just the letter W. Okie doke. This doesn't really affect what we do. It's a manufacturer requirement. So most everything we get, it's already, you grab a device, it has a white screw or it says W. If you grab a receptacle to install it or a switch or whatever you're doing, it's already done like this. So no major change there. Nothing to worry about. All right. So 210. Let me just go to real quick. I just want to let me close this because I want to follow along in the book with you guys. So we are in 210.8 ground fault. There is substantial changes to the 210.8, so it's very important that we pay attention. And this is going to be the last one that I do today. So, we're in 210.8. All right. So 210.8 ground fault circuit interrupter protection for personnel. 210.8. I just wanted to read the code, so I put the whole code in here. Ground fault circuit interrupter protection for personnel shall be provided as required in 210.8A through F. So they added F, right? It used to be E, so it used to say A through E, so they added an entire section F. So that F is new. The ground fault circuit interrupter shall be installed in a readily accessible location. Okay, so that didn't change. So the only change in that code is they added F. Okay, and then we're going to go on and tell you what it says. So if we go through this quote, we're going to go through that code in a minute. Oh, sorry. Whoop. Whiskey throttle. All right. And then they add some informational notes in here. Information in note number 3, C559 for GFCI requirements for boat hoists. That's not going to be this video. Informational note number 4, additional GFI requirements for specific circuits and equipment are contained in Chapter 4, 5, and 6. So what they're saying there is there are other GFCI requirements, and they're in those chapters. So this isn't all that you're going to find. They just added those two in here. Okay, and then they added some stuff in here. This is important because this pertains to us, right? So I want to read this section here. For the purpose of this section, when determining the distance from receptacles, the distance shall be measured as the shortest path the supply cord of an appliance connected to the receptacle would follow without piercing a floor, wall, ceiling, or fixed barrier, or the shortest path without passing through a window. Okay, so what that means is I'm going to tell you. This is how you measure. Let's say if the code says anything within 6 foot of a sink has to be GFI protected, here's what this means. When they say how you measure 6 foot, that's what they're talking about. So you're going to take a 6 foot string, and if you go from the top of the outer edge of the sink basin, you got the sink, and then you got the countertop. So you got to go from the sink, the outer edge of the sink, not the countertop, right? If that 6 foot string, or what they call a cord, attachment cord to an appliance, but just think of a string, can reach the receptacle, it has to be GFI protected. Okay? They just clarified how to make that measurement, and they also added the shortest path without passing through a window. Okay, so let's say if you have, they used to do it all the time. You got an enclosed Florida porch or Florida room, and the kitchen used to be on one side, and the Florida room used to be on the other, and they used to have windows, right? And the Florida room's all enclosed in, so it's considered indoor. If you have an outlet on the other side of that window in the kitchen, it doesn't have to be GFI protected because they excluded passing through a window. So if you're making that measurement through a window and that other side of that window isn't already required GFI location, then it doesn't count. So that's the major change there, how they measure the distance. So I just put the whole code in here, so there's no changes through, there's no, oh, this is what it said in the 17. So I put that slide in there, so this is what it said, not really important. Okay, so here we go. And because this is the residential code changes, I'm going to read this. So 210.8A is for dwelling units. Okay, so this is the major change from the 2017 to the 2020. So now in Florida, we got it. This is very important. So in dwelling units, now this is just receptacles. Okay, because I want you to know that. So 210.8A is just receptacles because it says right here, all 125 volt through 250 volt receptacles installed in the location specified in 210.8A1 through A11 and supplied by single phase branch circuits rated 150 or less to ground shall have common ground fault circuit interruption protection for personnel. That's the major changes. One is they added the through A through 11. The second is they changed the voltage through 250 volt. Okay, so all receptacles in a dwelling unit in these locations supplied via single phase branch circuit rated 150 less to ground. So what that means is if it's single phase branch circuit and you put your voltage tester from hot to ground and it's 150 volts or less, this is what is included in this. Okay, so in the bathroom, if you have a receptacle that's 250 volt, it now has to be, or 120, 240 volt, it now has to be GFI protected. In the garages, if it's a receptacle, any garage receptacle now has to be GFI, 120 or 250. You got a receptacle for a car charger, GFI protected. If you got a receptacle for a dryer, GFI protected. If you have a receptacle for anything else, GFI protected. And outdoors. Okay? Exception. And there's an exception to 3. This didn't change, so we're not going to go over that. Okay. They added basements. So any receptacle in a basement, GFI protected. Okay, and then there's exceptions here, which we're going to go over next. Any receptacle in a basement. So, okay, so here's the exceptions to this. These circuits don't have to have GFI protected. Receptacles supplying only a permanently installed fire alarm or burglar alarm system shall not be required to have ground fault circuit interruption protection. So if you got a 120 volt receptacle for a fire alarm panel or a burglar alarm panel in your garage, it doesn't have to be GFI protected. And then if it's in the basement. So exception to 5, receptacles supplying only a permanently installed fire alarm. So if it's in the basement, it doesn't have to be GFI protected. Sorry. Okay, the informational note, kitchens. So the circuits that are required in the kitchens didn't change. These are just the receptacles. Okay, what needs to be GFI protected? That's what we're talking about. That's what 210.8 is all about. What needs to be GFI protected? Okay, here's this one. So in sinks, where receptacles are installed within 6 foot from the top inside edge of the bowl of the sink. This didn't change. This has always been the same. But remember, they changed how you make the measurement. So I want you to look at this slide over here, this picture over here. If you have a hallway that's out, if you have a bathroom with a hallway or an outlet right outside the bathroom of this sink, and if it's 6 foot, if you could take a 6 foot string from the outside edge of the sink and hit that receptacle, it needs to be GFI protected. That's the change, okay? Now, if this was a window, this wouldn't need to be, right? That's the change. So I want you to realize, okay? I want you to realize they just changed how they make that measurement. You take a string, and if that string or a 6-foot cord, that you plug in, can hit that receptacle, it needs to be GFI protected. So if you have a range receptacle within 6 foot, measured by a cord, within 6 foot of the sink, it needs to be GFI protected. Okay? If it's a hardwired piece, if it's hardwired and not a plug, if it's an oven, that's not what we're talking about here. We're only talking about receptacles. Things that are hardwires is not included in 210.8A because it's just receptacles, okay? We'll make that sure, okay? And then they added here the same verbiage under 9, bathtub shower stalls. 6 foot of the outside edge of the bathroom tub. So the only change here is how they make that measurement. There was a little confusion. They cleared it up. Okay, here's a big one. 10, laundry areas. This didn't change. The only thing that changed, so before, laundry areas were required to be GFI protected, but only the 115 volt or 120 volt receptacles. Now because the voltage changed, the dryer or any other 250 volt receptacle in the laundry room has to be GFI protected. So the dryers now have to be on a GFCI breaker, 250 volt, or anything else receptacle 250 volt. Okay? All right, so there's an exception, and this is all new. Okay? So I'm going to read this, but here's the exception to 250 or 210.8A, okay? Okay, exception 2, 1 through 3, and 5 through 8, and 10. This is, okay? So I want to go to the code here. So let's go to the code. So exception 2, 1 through 3. So 210.8.1. So this exception includes bathrooms, garages, and outdoors, right? This is what this exception is, so follow along. 8 and 10. Okay? So in 8 and 10, there's an exception. Okay? Okay. I said that wrong. So the exception is 1 through 3. So this exception includes bathrooms, garages, outdoors, okay? And then 5 through 8, so it excludes basements, kitchens, sinks, and boathouses have this exclusion. And 10, laundry areas. So in those areas that I just listed, this type of device is excluded from being GFI protected, okay? We're going to read that, okay? Listed locking support and mounting receptacles utilized in combination with compatible attachment fittings installed for the purpose of serving a ceiling luminaire or ceiling fan shall not be required to be ground fault circuit interrupter protected. If a general purpose convenience receptacle is integral to the ceiling luminaire or ceiling fan, GFCI protection shall be provided. So they're coming out with these new receptacles. It's basically a receptacle. You put it in the ceiling. It looks like this here, right? It looks like this, right? We're talking about this here. Those things mount in the ceiling, and it's like an interchangeable thing. You could take a light down, you can swap it out. You want to put a ceiling fan in there, you change it to a ceiling fan, or you change it to a pendant light or a spotlight or whatever. This is basically a receptacle. So what they're saying is, because this is a receptacle, something you can plug in and out of, it's excluded if it's for ceiling luminaires. But now I want you to right? I want you to remember, if you're going to put an outlet there, remember you used to have those keyless fixtures with the light in them? You know what I'm saying? It used to have the keyless fixtures used to have the plug in them. You used to be able to get them, and it had a light, and you can also plug a receptacle. It had a receptacle plug in them. If you're going to put one of those in there, it does have to be GFCI protected. All right? So just realize this, that if you're using these receptacles for ceiling lights, because it's basically a receptacle, it's excluded, okay? You're allowed to not put those in GFIs. All right. All right, let's go back to here. And let's change in here. Okay, they added, this is the 11, all right? So 210.8A11 is indoor damp and wet locations. So they added this whole 11 to the thing. I don't know exactly. I couldn't think of many situations where this would come into effect, right? Because what indoor damp locations could you have in a house that isn't already, or in a dwelling unit that isn't already included? I'm thinking maybe a steam room, but maybe the grow rooms, right? If you convert your bedroom into a grow room, hey, guess what? That's considered a damp location, and all the receptacles in that grow room have to be GFCI protected, okay? So just know that they added 210.8A11, and it's indoor damp and wet locations. I'm not sure exactly what these are because, Florida rooms, maybe they added those. If it's, I don't know. Maybe one of you guys can find a situation. But in Florida, I don't think we have a lot. Maybe a mud room. I don't know. But they added that, so keep that in mind. All right. They added, 210.8C, crawl space lighting outlets. Okay? So 210.8C was added. GFCI protection shall be provided for lighting outlets not exceeding 120 volts installed in crawl spaces. Not a Florida thing, crawl spaces, but if you've got lighting outlets in there, let's say, they don't have to be GFCI protected. Okay? So I just want you to remember, 210.8A talked about receptacles. 210.8C is talking about lighting outlets. Lighting outlet, an outlet intended for the direct connection of a lamp holder or luminaire. So that's what they're talking about. So those, if you're in a crawl space and it's for a lighting outlet, that now has to be GFCI protected, okay? It used to be boat hoists in 2017. 210.8C used to be boat hoists, and they just removed it because they moved it to another location. That's all. Remove boat hoist from this section because all outdoor outlets and receptacles are GFI. So that's what they did there. Okay, so now remember, 210.8A dwelling units was talking about receptacles. So now everything else in 210.8 is going to be dealing with outlets, and you need to understand what an outlet is. Okay? Difference between a receptacle and an outlet. A receptacle is something that somebody would plug something into, like you got a 250 volt, you plug it in a welder. That what you're plugging into is a receptacle. The things you plug into in your house to get power, to plug in a fan or plug in a light or plug in a video game, what you're plugging into is a receptacle. An outlet is basically everything else. If you have a junction box, it's an outlet. If you have a light, you got a light. If it's something that you're going to tie a light onto, that's considered an outlet in the NEC code. If you've got a disconnect that you're going to go to an air handler unit, that disconnect is basically an outlet. So just keep that in mind. Let's see if I can. Let me read you what the NEC calls an outlet. So let's just look this up here. Okay, let's just go. I'm going to look this up. I'm on the fly here. I'm going rogue. So, receptacles. So let's look. Ready? Here is a receptacle, right? This is a receptacle. A contact device installed at the outlet for the connection of an attachment plug or for the direct connection of electrical utilization equipment designed to mate with the corresponding contact device. A single receptacle is a single contact device with no other contact devices on the same yoke or strap. A multiple receptacle is two or more contact devices on the same yoke or strap. So a duplex receptacle that you have in your house with two places to plug something in, that is considered a multiple receptacles. And then if there's just one, it's just single. So I want you to keep in that. That's what a receptacle is. Let's look at what an outlet is. Because you notice an outlet is a part of, the outlet is part of the definition of the receptacle, because what the receptacle is attached to, the box that the receptacle is installed into, is the outlet, right? But once you install a receptacle, it goes from outlet to receptacle. So let's look at what the NEC calls an outlet. I didn't know this for the longest time. So this is why I want to tell you guys. Okay, so this is an outlet. An outlet is a point on the wiring system at which current is taken to supply utilization equipment. Utilization equipment is anything. And now it could be the receptacle, it could be the switch, it could be a light fixture, it could be a disconnect for a piece of equipment, it could be the box for the water heater. Where you get the electrical source from, that's the outlet. So now we're talking about outlets, okay? So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so sorry about that. I'm going to have to edit that out. Okay, so remember, we are talking about A, that's for dwelling units, receptacles, right? Now we talked about 210.8C, which is talking about crawl spaces specifically, right? And they're talking about space lighting outlets. So lighting outlets, now that, I bet you're wondering right here, why are they talking about crawl spaces? Because if you looked over here, if you look in 210.8A, it already says crawl spaces. But you got to remember, 210.8A is talking about what? Receptacles. So now they want a 210.8 or 210C. 210.8C is talking about lighting outlets. So not only do the receptacles and crawl spaces have to be GFCI protected, but the lighting outlets that are 120 volts and less have to be GFI protected. If they're 240 volt, no, only 120 volts or less, not exceeding 120 volts. Okay, so now we've talked about that. That whole thing was added. You got a crawl space, you got a light outlet. What does it need to be? GFI protected. Now 210.8D. Now we're talking about ground fault circuit interruption protection for specific appliances. D, specific appliances. So this whole section changed. Here's what it says in the 2020. D, specific appliances. Unless, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going in and out of the code. So we're going to come over here. So we're going to read this. But anyway, unless GFCI protection is provided in accordance with 422.5B3 through B5, the outlets supplying the appliances specified in 422.5A shall have GFCI protection in accordance with 422.5B1 or B2. So I want you to understand this. What did it not say? It did not say receptacles. It said outlets. So if these specific appliances, even if they're receptacles or not receptacles, if it's just hardwired, they have to be GFCI protected no matter what. Either way, no matter. Okay? The 2017 says said D, kitchen dishwasher brand circuit. It used to say the dishwasher had to be GFCI protected. Now the code says specific appliances, and we're going to get into those specific appliances, okay? So they didn't remove dishwashers from the GFI requirements, just changed how they get referenced, okay? Didn't remove dishwashers, just changed how they told you that dishwashers were required. So let's take a look at this. Okay, so let's go through this little by little. 210.8D, specific appliances, GFCIs. Okay, so unless GFCI protection is provided in accordance with 425B3 through 5, the outlet supplying the appliance specified in 422A, 5A, shall have GFCI protection in accordance with 422.5B1 or B2. So let's go this one by one. Unless GFCI protected is provided in accordance with 422.5B3 through B5. So this is what that says. 422B5, 3 through 5 says an integral part of the attachment plug. 4 says within the supply cord, not more than 12 inches from the attachment plug, or factorily installed within the appliance, okay? So unless these pieces of equipment, appliances that we're going to specify next, have those things in them, the circuit needs to be GFCI protected. Okay. Okay, ready? The outlet supplying the appliances in 422.5A. So what is in 422.5A? Well, let me tell you. 422.5A says, 422.5A says, ground fault circuit interrupter, protection for personnel, general. So confusing. Okay. Appliances identified in 422.5A1 through A7 rated 150 volts or less to ground and 60 amperes or less, single or three-phase, shall be provided with Class A GFCI protection for personnel. Multiple Class A GFCI protected devices shall be permitted but shall not be required. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through that thing. So it gets a little hairy around there. Okay, so specific appliances. Let's start by doing this. Let's go to this one. Okay. So here's 210.8D. Okay, GFCI. All right. So first of all, let's get exactly what this code is talking about. Let's talk about the appliances that they're talking about. Okay, appliances specified in 422.5A. Okay, so this code says these appliances shall be GFI protected. Okay, automotive vacuum machines doesn't apply to us. It's not residential. Unless you got a nice house and it has an automotive vacuum machine, then you would. Drinking waters, coolers, and bottle fill stations, more common in residential, so that might come into contact. Cord and plug connected high pressure spray washing machines, not residential. Tire inflation machines, not residential. Vending machines, not residential. Sump pumps could be residential. No, we don't do a lot of them in Florida because we don't really have basements. But so sump pumps and dishwashers, those are the two main that you see in everyday residential installations. So they changed 210.8D and they just redid the verbiage to basically add these codes, to add all these pieces of equipment. It used to say dishwashers. Now they put this code reference in here. Okay. 422.8 or 5A. They put that code reference in there. And now it has all these other things. So dishwashers are still required to be GFCI protected. But hey, there's an exception. Because if you have a dishwasher that has an integral, GFI is an integral part of the attachment plug, or, let me go back into this one right here, within the supply cord not more than 12 inches from the attachment plug, or factory installed in the appliance. You don't have to be GFI. I've never seen one, so, okay. But then if it's on the plug, is it readily accessible? I don't know. We're not going to go there. I don't want to go Mike Holt on you, and I want to try to be specific as possible. Okay, so we know which appliances, right, that have to be GFCI protected. We know that they're saying unless there have these three things. Okay, and then there's four. This is just a really long way to say hey man, dishwashers. For us residential guys, dishwashers, GFI protected. I don't know why I'm wasting so much time on this. All right, let's go to the, and then there's another one that says shall have GFCI protection in accordance with 422 B1 or B2. So if you go to 420, all right, typo right here. Oh, typo. Okay, 422.5 B1 or B21 says GFCI should be in a readily accessible location. It should be listed and located in one or more of the following locations: within the branch circuit overcurrent protection device, the circuit breaker, or a device or outlet within the supply circuit. It's easy. I'm going to stop there because that's all we got. Okay, now let's go to 210.8E, equipment requiring servicing. This is kind of a one that we're going to have to get ready for. So I want you guys to all take a listen here, okay? So this whole section E is new. Okay? So 210.8E. This is for the residential guys. GFCI protection shall be provided for the receptacles required by 210.63. So 210.63 says, hey, you need these receptacles in your installation. Doesn't matter the installation. Residential, commercial, industrial, doesn't matter. Okay? So what they're saying is, if you need to put a receptacle in based on 210.63, it has to be GFCI protection. So what does 210.63 says? 210.63 says equipment requiring servicing. A 125 volt single phase 15 or 20 amp rated receptacle outlet shall be installed at an accessible location within 25 foot of the equipment specified in 210.63A and B. Okay, so what they're saying is you need a GFCI outlet within 25 foot of this equipment. Ready? A says 210.63A says heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration equipment. The required receptacle outlet shall be located on the same level as the heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration equipment. The receptacle outlet shall not be connected to the load side of the equipment branch circuit disconnecting mean. So, what are they saying there? So, if you have an outdoor piece of AC equipment, your condensing unit, you need to have a GFCI within 25 foot of that. Okay? And it cannot be connected to the load side of a disconnecting mean. So if you've got a disconnect that shuts down the AC unit, that disconnect is not allowed to shut down the GFI. Okay? So that's a code that is added. So if you got a condensing unit, you better damn well have a GFCI within 25 foot. Doesn't have to be dedicated. It can come off of any branch circuit inside the house. Doesn't say where it needs to get fed from. Doesn't say it needs to be a special dedicated branch circuit. But you need to have one. But it also says the heating equipment. So you now have to have a GFCI within 25 foot of the air handler on the inside. Okay? Now, I know what you're thinking. Does that mean I need to add GFCIs to my air handlers? Maybe. If your air handler's in the attic, yes, you got to have a GFCI in the attic within 25 foot of it. Okay? If your air handler's on, let's say, in the hallway of the house, more than likely you're going to have a GFCI somewhere because because of, we're going to keep reading here. So a receptacle outlet, there's an exception. A receptacle outlet shall not be required at 1 and 2 family dwellings for the service of evaporator coolers. Okay, we don't really install evaporator coolers, so that doesn't apply. But there's going to be another code. So it says here, I just want to note, it looks like we will need to be installing a GFCI within 25 foot of all air handling units, unless the bathroom or kitchen is close. It doesn't say what the GFCI has to be. There just has to be one within 25 foot and on the same level. So that means if the air handler's on the first floor, the GFCI's got to be on the first floor. It can be a kitchen GFI. It can be the bathroom GFI. It just says there needs to be a GFI within 25 foot. Receptacle within 25 foot of the air handler. Okay? And then B says other electrical equipment. In other than 1 and 2 family dwellings, a receptacle outlet shall be located as specified in 210.16 B1 and B2. This doesn't pertain to residential, so we're not including it. Okay? So the major thing here is the equipment has to have a GFI for servicing. So air handlers and outdoor condensing units. Okay, let's see what the next slide says. Okay, this is a big one. So this is going to take a little bit. All right, so everyone pay attention. All right. 210F outdoor outlets. So these are outdoor outlets. Remember, we talked about what an outlet is, right? Did we? We did, right? Do we need to go over that? Let's go over that. I want to go over that again. Okay, so what we're talking about here. Okay, so what are we talking about here? Okay, so 210.8F was added to the code. And 210.8F, outdoor outlets. Okay, we're not talking about outdoor receptacles. This is outdoor outlets. What is an outlet? A point in the wiring system at which current is taken to supply utilization equipment. Okay, so if you got a junction, if you got a box with a blank on it that feeds, it doesn't matter what it feeds. Let's say it's a HVAC equipment, the condensing unit. If you got a box out there that's going to feed if it's connected to a car charger, if you got a 250 volt or 120 volt branch circuit that feeds anything outdoors, it now needs to be GFCI protected. So this is very close. There's some important stuff in here. Okay, all outdoor outlets for dwellings other than those covered in 210.8A3, exception to 3, that are supplied by single-phase branch circuits rated 150 volts to ground or less, 50 amps or less, shall have ground fault circuit interrupt protection for personnel. So anything 50 amps or less, 120, 240 doesn't matter, because if you got a 240 volt outlet for a condensing unit, it doesn't matter. When you go either phase to ground, it's 150 volts or less. It's 120 volts. So they got rid of that 120, 240 volt thing. It's 150 volts to ground. Exception: ground fault circuit interruption protection shall not be required on lighting outlets other than those covered in 210.8C. Okay, so lighting outlets, not included. These are outdoor outlets other than lighting outlets. Let's get into this. So this is my note. So with this code, all 120 or 240 volt outlets are required to be GFCI protected. So let's read this exception. 210.8A3, talking about receptacles, outdoors. Okay? Exception to 3. Receptacles that are not readily accessible and are supplied by branch circuits dedicated to electric snow melting, de-icing, piping, and vessel heating equipment shall be permitted to be installed in accordance. So what they're saying is, the only thing that's excluded from this is stuff for de-icing, right? Critical stuff that needs to be on and not on GFCI, okay? So the exception doesn't pertain to us here. All right, so now I know what you're thinking, right? These are all things that now have to be GFCI protected because they're I want, less than 50 amps and are outdoor. Okay? Pool heater, if it's 50 amps or less, it's got to be GFI protected. You got a 120 volt circuit that's hardwired to your timer, your sprinkler timer, GFI protected. You got a 240 volt circuit that runs your irrigation pump, 240 volt or 120 volt, GFI protected. Condensing units, GFCI protected. That's new. That's big. But I want you to hold on there. Okay, because there's an exception. Okay, so let's talk about these condensing units. Now, how do I want to go about this? So you remember when I told you in the beginning that the Florida Building Code dictates how and what how we get our codes? Well, there's an exception in the Florida Building Code under Chapter 27 or 34 that pertains to GFCI protection for condensing units. And I want to read it right here. Okay? So the Florida Building Code amended, it said, basically, we're going to take everything out of the National Electrical Code 2020 and make it our code except these things. Okay? And that exception is 2. I'm just going to read this one here. Exception number 2. GFCI protection shall not be required for listed and labeled HVAC equipment. Informational note, CUL 660335-2-40. Household and similar electrical appliances safety, part number 2-40. Particular requirements for electrical heat pumps, air conditioners, and dehumidifiers, or UL 1995 heating and cooling equipment for production safety standards. So basically, here's the thing, is the HVAC equipment doesn't meet the standard for GFCI protection. So if today you installed a condensing unit, outside condensing unit on a GFCI, like the National Electrical Code says it's required, it would not run properly. It would trip because the condensing units aren't built to the high standards yet. Okay? Because so I think they've given them like till 2026, and they're going to change the way the condensing units are built and manufactured, so they will be able to be installed on a GFCI protection without causing tripping. But right now, they're excluded. You don't have to put condensing units or HVAC equipment on GFIs because they're not built to the proper standards that wouldn't trip a GFI. So, all right? So that's a big change. So just remember that. Outdoor outlets. All right. All right. That's it for today because now we're in 2:10:11. So I wanted to stop the video there. I don't know how long the video is, but we're going to get it. And I hope you guys at the shop are learning and having fun. And if you have any questions, bring them up to me and we can make changes. All right, everybody. You stay classy, San Diego. I got to stop.